Hey guys, this is ggDoA with an ultra ghetto, ultra low tech, ultra unimpressive video in terms of looks, but hopefully impressive in terms of content. And it's going to be about the new expansion for Hearthstone. That's right, Goblins versus Gnomes, which is really cool. I'm extremely excited about this. Actually, I'm just excited about any new cards for Hearthstone. I mean, we're still in a period of time where the game has a relatively small card pool, and that means a small pool of competitive decks as well, and I think 120 new cards that Blizzard is saying will be in this expansion is going to help that a lot. It's going to be great. The game is already fun, and I think it's only going to get more fun from here. So I thought it'd be fun to just go ahead and let you take a look at all my desktop bookmarks, but when you're done looking at those, we can go ahead and talk about some of the new cards that Blizzard has kind of released for this. I think it's like a 20-something or so is in this list. But I thought I'd just go through one by one, and we'll just kind of have a little chat. Well, I'll be talking and you'll be listening, but feel free to leave comments or tweet at me as well if you have any impressions on these cards. Because, I mean, these are just my gut reactions, right? These are just kind of my first impressions, and obviously there are a lot more cards coming in this set. This is like, what, less than a fourth of them? So anything I say can and probably will be incorrect in terms of how these cards are going to be used in the game. We don't really know a lot about the expansion, very little, which is cool. It means there's a lot more to find out. And rather than try to figure out how these cards can kind of fit in the current decks into the current metagame, I think it'll be fun to sort of think about what type of decks could be possibly made too. And if you hear a little bit of extra noise in the background, that's just my dog. She's going around, and obviously as soon as I'm trying to do something that doesn't involve her, going after everything in the apartment. So hopefully nothing gets broken, hopefully the building doesn't collapse, and let's go ahead and start with the first card on the list here. And I'm just on a Blizzard site basically. I'm just going to go through it there, and I will go ahead and post a link as well too if you want to go check it out yourself in the description for the video. So starting on the left, it's the Annoy-o-tron. So that's kind of cool. It's kind of like a super Goldshire Footman, right? I mean, he's one more mana, he's a 1/2 taunt, but he's got Divine Shield. So, yeah, okay. 2 mana for 1/2 taunt, Divine Shield. Maybe there's a place for it in something. I mean, I think this is going to be one of those cards that if you're going to be running a sort of a mech tempo deck, which I think a lot of people are going to be interested in trying, myself included, this guy might not be bad to include for the early game. I think he synergizes well with some of the stuff we've seen already. Beyond that, 1 damage isn't really terribly useful. I mean, yeah, technically it's 2 quote-unquote because of the Divine Shield if we're talking about, minion trading potentially. But, I don't know, any 1/2 with taunt, anything Goldshire Footman-esque makes me a little bit nervous. So the Divine Shield I think helps a lot. I think 2 mana is acceptable. You don't want to make him a 2/2, otherwise he's just like an extremely good, what is it, Frostwolf Grunt, I think it is. It's the 2/2 taunt that already exists in the game, so you have to make him a 1/2 just to kind of make him a little bit unique and not like ultra good. And you can see it as a common card, so I think this guy might see a little bit of use in tempo decks. He's certainly good for protecting things like, your other valuable 1-cost cards like Undertakers, like maybe a coined out Knife Juggler that somehow magically survives to turn 2. So I think there's going to be some uses for the Annoy-o-tron, and I think he definitely does have some synergy with some of the mech stuff that we'll look at later, and we'll talk about that when we get to it. So moving on to the next one, we have Armor Plating. I don't know why I'm circling this with my mouse. I guess it's just like, in case you can't see, here's a really fast-moving mouse pointer that's hard to see as well. That helps, right? Maybe not. I don't know. Armor Plating. It's one of the new cards that looks like they're going to be pieces of scrap or what's it called? Spare parts. I think that's what it is. There's other cards. There's other cards in the set that we'll see that give you a spare part in your hand, and I'm assuming that's what this is. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's pretty likely that that's the type of thing this is. Because I mean, it's kind of banana-esque. King Mukla would be proud, rather, a 1-mana card that gives a little buff to your minion. It's not +1/+1, but it's +1 health, so not much to say about that. Something that'll kind of be more involved in some of the other cards in the set, and other cards we'll look at later in the video. Blingtron 3000, one of the first legendaries announced for Goblins versus Gnomes, and of course a item in World of Warcraft that you can talk to and accept a little quest, get a present, get some stuff out of it. Usually it's just vendor trash, but every once in a while you get something kind of cool. But a 5 for a 3/4, and I come from Magic the Gathering, and one of the things I always really want to look at is the cost per mana. And the general rule of thumb is that you want you don't want the mana cost higher than both the attack and defense, right? It can be equal to one of those. That's when it gets really efficient as far as cost goes. Now, in Hearthstone, you can go a little bit higher, I think. I think it's perfectly fine to have one that's maybe 1 or 2 above that, if the ability is good enough. And, the same goes for any CCG, I suppose. So let's look at Blingtron. He's got a battle cry that says, equip a random weapon for each player. Now, obviously, we don't know what these weapons are yet. Obviously, this is something that's going to, I shouldn't say obviously, but probably going to be part of other cards that are in the set. I would imagine that there's going to be a lot of cards that interact with weapons that the players might be using. So, maybe he is a way to set something up for another card that's coming out in the set. But you can't deny that the Blingtron 3000 into Harrison Jones is a sick turn 10, right? Gonna draw some cards, gonna get a 3-4 out. I don't know, man. I have no idea what the weapons are. We'll see. Bomb Lobber is the next card, 5 for a 3/3. So I see that and I'm like, I'm kind of cringing. It's a 5 for a 3/3, right? But deal 4 damage to a random enemy minion. And I think we're finding out over time with Hearthstone that this random stuff that's in the game, and there is a lot of RNG in the cards that Blizzard showed us. And again, I wouldn't take that as an indication of how the entire set is. I'm thinking more Blizzard just wants to show the general populace, your average gamer, cards that are exciting and fun, right, to use. But we're looking at this from more of a competitive side, right? So Bomb Lobber obviously is not worth it for the cost. 5 for 3/3, not good. Deal 4 damage to a random enemy minion, though. It's interesting. It's a little bit intriguing. It's certainly a card that can bring you back some tempo if it hits the right guy. Obviously, I wouldn't want to play him against a paladin, but against possibly like a druid or something like that, against some of those classes that have those little bit higher health minions, this could be a card that would theoretically, help you maybe regain a little bit of tempo in terms of you playing a zoo type deck, right? I'm kind of thinking of this in terms of, if he was in a zoo deck, right? Think of him in Warlock Zoo, and think of a situation that we all run into where you're playing against a druid, they're starting to get some of those big scary minions out, and then you put this guy down and he hits 4 damage on the right guy, you can trade efficiently, and you're back in the game, right? So I can see situations where this guy could work, but again, 5 for a 3/3, my initial gut reaction is that his health and mana isn't up to snuff with what he does. I mean, the other thing too is you can't make it like 3 damage targeted, otherwise he's just kind of like a cheaper fire elemental. So I mean, there's other cards in the game that are kind of affecting how the newer cards can sort of be, because we're not really phasing anything out yet because the game is so fairly new. But I think he's an interesting card. I think it could see some use. I'm not 100% sold on it. At the point you're playing 5 mana stuff, a 3/3 isn't going to be a terribly great board presence, but maybe because of the 4 damage, he can give you that little bit of a board edge anyway to make it worth it. So he's a card that I'm very interested in, and I'm curious to see how he's going to pop up in decks that the pro players are making and that everybody's making, really. So let's move on to the next 4. All right, Doombot. Now this guy comes out of, what's his name? Dr. Boom, I think it is. I think it's Dr. Boom. Anyway, it's an NPC. It's a enemy mob from Netherstorm in the Burning Crusade, in the second expansion for World of Warcraft. Really fun quest, but this dude throws Doombots out at you, and you have to take them out and kind of avoid these. But 2 of those guys come out of this other legendary. So I'm not going to talk a lot about it right now, because obviously it'll come more into play when we look at that other legendary card. But just on the surface, 1/1. Deals 1 to 4 damage to a random enemy minion as a death rattle. Pretty cool. I like it. It's kind of neat. Potentially very damage efficient. But let's move on. For now, anyway. 3 mana for Bouncing Blade. It is an epic card. Important to keep in mind. Deal 1 damage to a random minion. Repeat until a minion dies. That is a crazy card, guys. I mean, it could bounce around forever, depending on what the board is looking like. It could kill something with 1 health right away. So, and it's a warrior card as well. Keep that in mind too. So, this is something obviously that only warriors can use in their decks. And if we think about it, the current warrior decks, the competitive ones, aside from what Kranich is using at BlizzCon right now, for example, the more aggressive, the Worgen combo decks. Overall, I would say that most people are thinking control when they look at most new warrior cards. And I think you can do that. And I think you can make some use of this guy in the current Control Warrior meta, right? Obviously, if he hits your Acolyte of Pain, that's nice. It's a card draw. He can give you some armor through the Armor Smith. My dog decided to climb up on my lap. Hold on 1 second. I have to put her down. No, I didn't mean it like that. No, not like that. I have to put her down onto the ground from my lap. No, don't worry. She's fine. Alright, so Bouncing Blade, we'll go back to that. It could also, it could also work in some of the Enraged decks as well, too. I mean, you do 1 damage to one of your minions. Presumably the Bouncing Blade ends before it kills said minion, but it can activate a lot of those Enrages, too. So, yeah, it's more RNG, yeah, it's more random, but I could see situations where this would work. I'm certainly going to try it. I've always, you guys should know by now that I'm always up for trying the, most aggressive thing I can think of. And so this guy plus Enrage could work. This guy plus Control could work in that as well, too. I think it's a really intriguing card, and I think a lot of these cards are quite interesting in terms of what we can imagine them doing. And again, we have no idea what the other, essentially, like 3/4 or more of this expansion is going to have in it. So all of these impressions are just based on the small subset of cards in the overall expansion. But it's kind of fun to theory craft, so that's why we're doing this. Now, Clockwork Giant. Kind of the, I guess you could call it like the anti-handlock giant card, sort of. He's 12 mana, but he costs 1 less for each card in your opponent's hand. And this is cool to see. I love to see cards like this, because I've always felt, well, I mean, it's not really a matter even of my feelings, it's just the way CCGs have traditionally been balanced, and the way I was hoping that Blizzard would balance Hearthstone, which I think they have for the most part if we look at the most recent stuff. Obviously in the first 8 months or so of Hearthstone, there was a lot of number tweaking that had to go on with the cards themselves. But when we saw Naxxramas come out, there were cards that were designed to sort of go against the current meta and kind of shake things up a little bit. And this, it could certainly do this as well. It's it could be a pretty decent anti-control card, just right off the bat. If you're going up against someone with the coin and they have a poor first turn, and you have this guy in your opening hand. No, I'm trying to do math. This is a terrible idea, but they're gonna have what, like 5 cards in their hand possibly. So he's already down to 7. So potentially he could get very cheaper as the turns go on and the handlock keeps building up their hand, or the control priest or the control paladin keeps building up their hand. So it could work out. I'm not thinking this guy's going to see a whole lot of use, honestly, because he seems a little bit too situational, but it's cool that it's in there. It makes me wonder what we could do with tournaments that included sideboards in Hearthstone. And if you're not familiar with what a sideboard is, it's a small group of cards that you're allowed to kind of set aside with a tournament type that has only a single deck in it, so you only bring 1 deck as opposed to kind of the last hero standing format that's common in Hearthstone right now. So I could see this guy as sort of a sideboard card, right? But right now no tournaments are really running sideboards, but we'll see what the future holds. I'd like to see some more tournament experimentation go on, while we've got a little bit of an off-season coming up, and this guy could fit well in a tournament that involves sideboards. So we'll see how he ends up. Clockwork Gnome. Death Rattle, add a spare card to your hand. So remember that one we looked at just a little bit earlier? I'll go back to a second. Armor Plating. I'm guessing these are the spare part cards. There's a few of these in the cards Blizzard has released. And I'm imagining that's what Clockwork Gnome will give you. So it's kind of neat. It's, a couple little things. We'll see later. There's one that like swaps the health and attack of a minion. There's one that gives +1 attack. There's another one I think that returns a minion to your hand. I can't remember. We'll check it out later. But it's interesting. It's maybe a little bit too random. I mean, he is a 1 for a 2/1, and it's debatable whether or not the spare part is actually going to be useful. But again, this is something that could interact a lot more with other cards that we don't know about yet. It's something that, I suppose, if you get the right spare part, it's certainly helpful. It might help you, gain a little bit of tempo if you're able to buff one of your creatures that are already on the board and sort of trade up with it, So we'll see. It's again, I'm going to say this a lot. It's something interesting. It's something that I think has potential, but we'll have to kind of wait and see. So Cogmaster, this guy, when you see cards like this, you're like, all right, Blizzard, I get it. You really want us to make aggro sort of mech decks. All right, fine, Blizzard, you win, I'll try it. you don't have to push very hard, man. I enjoy aggro decks. So Cogmaster, obviously, 1 for a 1/2, has +2 attack while you have a minion, or while you have a mech. While you have a minion, that'd be insane. While you have a mech. So let's just go back a little bit here. Remember Annoy-o-tron, 2 for a 1/2 Divine Shield? Play him on turn 2 after a turn 1 Cogmaster. Suddenly you've got a 3/2 swinging, and he's behind a 1/2 taunt with Divine Shield. So there's a situation where we're starting to see a little bit of synergy in these cards that Blizzard has released. And of course, you know, it's situational. Will I draw it? Will this be consistent enough to be competitive? But I think the potential's there. So I like this kind of thing. I think it's a cool card. And I also like that he doesn't perpetually gain attack. This guy isn't going to suffer from what I'll call Undertaker syndrome, where you know, he's got to be in every deck. He's just that good. He's the card that everybody's like afraid of but loves at the same time. You know, so I think this is a better way to do it rather than just perpetually gaining attack on cards. I like the thing that he has +2 attack. He's stronger if you've got another card in play, and if that card leaves play, then he goes back to a 1/2. I think personally, I think that's a better way to do these types of cards. So cool to see, very cool. Dr. Boom. Speaking of cool, 7 for a 7/7. I look at that, and right off the bat, I'm like, all right, good, mana efficient. Cost equals health and attack. Great, awesome. But he's got this battle cry as well. Summon 2 1/1 Boombots. And remember, we took a look at the Boombot before. That's the 1/1 that when it dies, it does 1 up to 4 damage to a random enemy, I believe it is, or enemy minion. I think it's minion. Oops. Random enemy. Okay, so it can do potentially damage to your opponent as well. So if you think about this guy, I mean, there's a reason he's legendary, right? He's mana efficient, 7 for 7/7, and on top of that, he summons 2 1/1s that are legitimately pretty good as far as death rattle goes. So I think Dr. Boom's got a chance to really see some play. Again, you know, it's all going to depend on how well he synergizes with other stuff. I mean, we don't really see a ton of decks that use a lot of expensive legendaries. Control Warrior, Control Paladin. That's really about it as far as multiple expensive legendary cards go. And yeah, I could see him fitting into Control Paladin possibly. You know, maybe give you a little bit of extra burst at the end for Control Warrior to help you clean up the board a little bit for that last, you know, Garrosh push or something. But this is a guy that I'm really hoping has a lot more synergy with more of the cards that we haven't seen yet. That's kind of my hope for Dr. Boom. And again, you know, he's a dude from Netherstorm for Burning Crusade, which was an awesome expansion. 1 mana for Emergency Coolant, freeze a minion, so this looks like another one of the spare parts that we've seen earlier. Pretty cool. Yeah, 1 mana, freeze a minion. Can be helpful. It's basically, you know, an Ice Lance without the ability to target characters, without the ability to do the 4 damage. But what do you expect? You know, it's just kind of a freebie card, right, that comes from another one, a la the banana from King Mukla, right? So again, you know, we really have to see if, first of all, the cards that produce these spare parts are viable in competitive play, and then it seems like there's maybe, I think I've seen 4 or 5 different spare parts, so you've got a lot that you might end up getting, and we have to see, you know, if there's a good enough chance that one of these will be useful enough to have, again, you know, in your deck, those spare part guys. But either way, it's cool. It's kind of fun to see. Randomness is fun. I enjoy it. But let's move on to Mechano. It's another legendary, 4 for a 3/2, a little bit on the expensive side, but he gives your other minions Wind Fury, Taunt, or Divine Shield at random. So this guy, I think, could be a lot of fun. Like, this is a dude that I would immediately throw in a zoo deck, because it's just, I don't know, first of all, it just seems fun, right? I mean, I've got a decent board developed with my Warlock Zoo deck. I drop this guy on turn 4, and suddenly my Flame Imp that's magically survived has Wind Fury, right? I mean, or Divine Shield. It could be very good. It could be very useless. So it's neat. I mean, again, if your board gets cleared and he's all you got in your hand, then 4 for a 3/2 is not very good. But playing him on an already developed board could be devastating for your opponent. And I think we want to maybe include like Shaman as well, Paladin. Any sort of class that has the ability to produce, or Druid for that matter, that has the ability to produce sticky minions, we'll call them. You know, I think this guy could work okay, and maybe Hunter as well with some beasts. But it's interesting. It's another cool card. I really like this guy. I plan on trying him immediately when the expansion comes out. Explosive Sheep is our next card. 2 mana for a 1/1 Death Rattle. Deal 2 damage to all minions. So That's a lot of damage to your minions, guys. At the same time, that will clear totems off the board. It will clear a lot of health from your average zoo deck, from your average aggressive deck. And if you notice, a lot of these more tempo-oriented cards, I'm just circling this guy because he's got 2 health. I haven't actually gotten to him yet, but a lot of these cards have like 2 health, right? So Explosive Sheep can be potentially a very big board clear in the meta that might develop in the next expansion. So I think it's definitely a card that's worth keeping an eye on. I like the potential applications in Control Warrior right off the bat. But again, it's something that I'd prefer to use against aggro or possibly, shaman or something like that. So it's should be cool. I like it. Keep an eye on it anyway. Worth considering. Finicky Cloakfield. Give a friendly minion stealth until your next turn for 1 mana. This really looks like a spare part. I'm telling you, man. I'm pretty sure these are the spare part cards. So again, something that could be randomly very beneficial or randomly very useless. Again, it's RNG. Will these guys see competitive play? I don't know. We'll see. Let's move on. 2 mana for the Flame Cannon. Deal 4 damage to a random enemy minion. This is very interesting. Mage, actually. Blizzard released, I believe, it's 3 different Mage class cards in the small group that they showed us today at BlizzCon. And this is definitely one of the most interesting ones to me because it's first of all very cost efficient, 2 mana for 4 damage. It's really good, and it is random. But at the same time, if you're playing it early on for some board control, when you're playing a 2 mana card, there's not going to be a lot of stuff on the board of your opponents. So you've got I think a fairly good chance to get a lot of value out of this one. So depending on how mages are going to be building when the expansion comes out, depending on how the meta changes, I think Flame Cannon could actually see a lot of use in terms of early board control for a more control-oriented deck. Maybe even something a little bit more aggressive, but I think to me, it just looks like really good early board control. So we'll see how that all pans off, but definitely a card I'm excited about. Moving on to the last one on this screen, Gnomish Experimenter. Battlecry, well, first of all, 3 for 3/2. Battlecry, draw a card. If it's a minion, transform it into a chicken. I have no idea what to think about this guy. I mean, does the minion come onto the board as a chicken? Do you just have like a 1/1 chicken in your hand? Like, yeah, he's 3 for 3/2, and you get to draw a card. But is the risk I'm seeing here? Am I predicting this right? Where when he is played, you get to potentially draw a card, but if you draw a minion, it's kind of gimped, right? It's kind of worthless after that. It becomes a very weak chicken, I would imagine. So it's hard to really judge this guy's usefulness right now because we don't really know exactly how the card acts. And I'm not at BlizzCon. Obviously, there's people out there that have played with this card and could tell me. And obviously, if you know, leave a comment in the description. I'd love to find out exactly how this card operates. But if we're looking at, this guy and maybe something like more controlling sort of freeze mage deck that doesn't have a lot of minions, that deals mostly with freezing the board and then doing direct damage, this guy could be okay for a little bit of board presence and a card draw. 3 for 3/2, not too bad. So depending on how it all works, I don't know, you can see some play. He's a rare. I don't know. He's got that going for him anyway. We'll see, I guess. Let's move to the next page. Goblin Blast Mage, 4 for a 5/4. So right off the bat, I like that. 4 mana for a 5/4, so the attack exceeds his mana cost, which is pretty awesome. Battlecry, if you control a mech, deal 4 damage randomly split among enemy characters. This guy, I think, is really, really good. I've got a feeling that there's going to be some very good mage aggro/tempo options that we're going to see become popular in Goblins versus Gnome, and I think this guy is going to be on the forefront. Again, just initial gut reaction, because we've already seen aggressive mage be fairly successful over the lifetime of Hearthstone. It's not terribly popular right now, but it is out there, and just as recently as the EU regionals, the Fishu used a very good aggressive mage deck. So while this guy isn't as aggro-oriented, he's more tempo, he's more sort of board presence. He's more zoo-oriented, I guess you could say. So I think he's pretty exciting, man. I mean, he's kind of like a +1 spell power magic missiles that's kind of packed into a mana-efficient card. Definitely, in my opinion, one of the better cards that I've seen in this little group that's been released by Blizzard. And above all that, it says split among enemy characters, so that includes the player as well. So the player can take damage from this guy too. So I think it's a great card. I think it's going to potentially see a lot of use, and we'll see if that's right or not. But let's move on to the Mad Bomber, or the Matter Bomber, my bad, Matter Bomber. A 5 for a 5/4, alright, whatever. But he deals 6 damage randomly split between all other characters. So you, your opponent, your minions, their minions, everybody gets a bomb. He's like the Oprah Winfrey of bombs. You get a bomb, you get a bomb, we all get bombs, everyone gets a bomb. So I don't know, I don't like cards like this. They're just too random. They're fun, but they're not competitive, right? They're not generally very good in competitive play. Even if, you know, you don't have anything on your side of the board and they have a bunch of minions, what if he does like 3 of the damage to you? That's not so great, especially because he's only got 4 health for a 5-mana minion. So I don't know, we'll probably see Chinese players put him in a deck or two, but I don't think anybody else will use it. The reason I mentioned that is because in the OGN tournaments we've had, for some reason the Chinese players love to put Mad Bomber in a lot of different decks. So I don't know, man, they probably saw this one and they were like, yes, they like heard the Hallelujah Chorus song play and like light shone down, and they're like, wow, we finally found the perfect card for our decks. But we'll see. I'm not going to use it in mine, I don't think. Maybe Arena might be fun, but who knows. Move on to the Mech Warper. 2 mana for a 2/3. Your mechs cost 1 less. Now, on the surface, that seems good, right? 2 for a 2/3. Mana efficient. I like it. Your mechs cost 1 less. Good. Your other minions that you presumably are using in your decks are going to be easier to play. With that said, it generally hasn't been terribly popular at the competitive level to include these types of cards. You know, we don't see a lot of... I don't even remember the actual name of it, like Dark Portal, Minion Portal for Warlock, the one that it's a 0/4 and it makes your minions cheaper. You know, part of that obviously is that it doesn't have any attack, but part of it is that if you're spending mana, and essentially if you're spending board advantage, I should say, early on, making your stuff that comes later cheaper, you would better have a good board state for that to happen, because otherwise you're going to lose a lot of presence on your side. So the fact that he's 2 for a 2/3 I think helps a lot. I think this guy legitimately could see some use, but just historically, you know, these types of cards haven't been used a lot in competitive play. So, you know, we'll see. We'll see. It might change. Again, I think this guy is certainly one of the best that I've seen. Probably the best that I've seen of this type of card in Hearthstone. But time will tell. You know, the question is, what will get the boot out of somebody's deck in favor of this guy, right? You know, what would you rather put in your... What would you take out of your deck to put this guy in? That's kind of the end question. It might be a good card, but maybe there's just not room for him, you know? So, we'll see. Moving on, 9 mana for a 9/7, Mechanier Thermoplug. He was the, I believe, the final boss in Gnomes, that horrible, horrible nightmare of an instance from Vanilla WoW that still takes a very long time to this day. Yeah, anyone who plays WoW knows what I'm talking about. That and Wailing Caverns, never again. But anyway, he looks like a pretty cool card, though. I mean, I love Leper Gnome, so right off the bat, this guy, you know, he's going to get crafted by me for sure. But 9 for a 9/7, at that point in the game, yeah, I mean, there's probably hard removal, but either way, 7 health is a bit more on the durable side, obviously. So there's a chance he'll stick around. But the big thing is whenever an enemy minion dies, summon a Leper Gnome. So right away, your brain starts churning, and you're like, all right, well, how can I somehow combo this guy in a way that I get, you know, suddenly like 4 Leper Gnomes on my side, right? And then I get like tons of damage done from that. That's the question. So, you know, if we kind of think about it here and there, you would need something that would create some sort of, you know, board clear essentially, or kill a lot of minions, right? So he would be good to play on a board where you're going to be trading aggressively in a turn and killing a lot of minions on the enemy side. My dog is playing with a squeaking rubber chicken right now, in case you're hearing this. You know, to some people I might just sound crazy. I might just sound like I'm making all this stuff out. I might be playing with the rubber chicken and you just never know it because there's no webcam. But no, I assure you there is a 6-month-old pug puppy in the equation right now, and it is playing with a rubber chicken and really wants my attention. But anyway, Mechanier Thermoplug, yeah, seems kind of cool. He kind of seems a bit... He seems a bit Kel'Thuzad-ish in that he requires probably a board that's fairly well developed where you're ready to kind of make something happen already for him to be good. But I'm sure other people will find uses for him. I mean, if you think about it this way, you have, you're a priest, and you have your, what's it called? Oh my gosh, my dog is distracting me, I'm forgetting card names. The 3/5 where you do damage instead of healing. But you play him, then you play Circle of Healing, 4 damage to all the enemy minions, you presumably board clear a lot, suddenly you get like 3 or 4 Lepidromes on your side, and you get a big tempo advantage. Now, this late in the game, we're talking 9 mana, we're talking turns 9 or 10, it's probably going to be a little bit too late already to have something like that happen. This dog. But, yeah, I don't know, I think it could be interesting. I don't think it's going to see a lot of play, but I think it's cool. Micro Machine, 2 mana for a 1/2 at the start of each turn, gain +1 attack. So Shade of Naxxramas has like a secret admirer, and it's the Micro Machine. He's not stealthed, but so I guess he's not a very secret admirer, but every turn he's going to at least gain +1 attack. So again, 2 mana, so that means, you know, if you can coin him out and have a 2/2 on turn 2, you can play him on turn 2 and have a 2/2 on turn 3. So, you know, if we're talking about an early tempo sort of play with this guy, because you're not really going to get a lot of use out of him late game, I think. I don't think he's going to be the greatest. Obviously, you can get out of control if he's untouched. You know, maybe you can do something like turn 1 Voidwalker, turn 2 Micro Machine, and then he just sort of gains power steadily behind the wall of taunts, presumably, right? So there are scenarios where this guy could become very strong. Again, he only has 2 health. He's very easily removable as well. So I don't know if he's really worth it, honestly. My initial reaction, I'm not terribly impressed by this card. I'd be much more interested if it was like a rare that was 1 mana for a 1/2, and then you could have a 2/2 in the start of your next turn, which still I don't think would be terribly overpowered, because if you think about it, you know, we've got like Flame Imp and stuff like that, 3/2 on your second turn that's eligible to make plays and stuff. So I don't know. I'd like to see this guy tweaked a little bit, but I don't think he's necessarily bad as he is. I just don't really see him as incredibly useful when you weigh him against the other early game options, right, that we have in Hearthstone in terms of tempo and zoo. But again, that could totally change depending on what else is in this expansion. You know, maybe there's some 1-drops out there that are going to make this guy really, really good. We'll have to wait and see. But let's move on to Mimiron's Head. Of course, Mimiron, I believe a boss from Ulduar, which is an instance that I never actually finished. It's a raid, rather, that I never actually finished back in Wrath of the Lich King. But I played a little bit of it anyway. Didn't do that fight, though. 5 for a 4/5 in Hearthstone. At the start of your turn, if you have at least 3 mechs, destroy them all and form, I don't know, I'm just going to say Voltron, man. I have no idea. Whatever. He can be Defender of the Universe. But Voltron is a card we'll look at later. It has a Mega Charge or something like that. We'll get to it. It's pretty cool. But 5 for a 4/5, not terribly inspiring. If you play him on a safe board, obviously, you can get this extremely good creature out of the deal. I do like these kind of cards being put into the game. It sort of follows the trend that we saw started in Naxxramas with Fugan and Stalag, which I thought was cool. Maybe not the most competitive cards ever, but I thought they're cool. And I like to build cool decks and play for fun sometimes, just like anybody else does, right? So I think this guy is going to be, at the very least, a very fun card. And possibly, depending on how the meta shakes up, maybe, just maybe, a card that we'll see in some decks. You know, again, if you think about it this way, playing a zoo deck, playing some sort of aggressive, sort of mid-rangey sort of tempo deck, if you can get stickier mechs that stay on the board that you're reasonably sure you're going to get to be able to last until the next turn, then this guy could be really good as like a finisher, right? Or an early way to do a ton of damage to your opponent. The creature that he spawns from killing your other minions does 16 damage. I believe it's like a 4/6 or 4/8 or something, and we'll get to it. But it could be good. Again, we'll see. Every card I talk about here has a caveat, we'll see, you know, because we have to check out the other cards in the set first before any sort of final decisions can be made. So moving on, the Piloted Shredder. I think these are very intriguing to me, because if you look at it, 4 for 4/3, whatever, it's okay cost-wise. Death Rattle, though, summon a random 2-cost minion. Now, again, people are out there who have used these cards already, probably know exactly what that entails. My question is it a 2-cost minion out of the 2-cost minions in your deck? Is it out of 2-cost minions in the set or the game? Is it 2-cost minions out of a specific pool? You know, a la Ysera or something like that, you know, where it's like a certain set of minions. The same goes for the Piloted Sky Golem as well. Summon a random 4-cost minion on Death Rattle. But either way, it's pretty cool. Essentially, it could be a fairly efficient card in that you can trade him and then still have a minion on the board. And depending on what these 2-drops and 4-drops are, and I think there's one for 6 drops later on, it could be good. So we'll keep an eye on that one, see exactly what that entails, and then kind of make a better decision about it later on. So on to the next page. 2 mana for 3/2, the Recombobulator. Battle Cry, transform a friendly minion into a random minion with the same cost. So again, where are these minions coming from? What is the pool that these minions are being drawn from? Are they your deck? Are they the set? Are they the game? Is it a specific pool of minions just for this card? I'm going to guess it's probably something from your deck. But again, we'll have to kind of wait and see. 2 for a 3/2. You know, already I feel like that's pretty decent mana efficient wise. And the Battle Cry, again, only friendly minions. You can't do it on your opponent or anything like that. So if you have, you know, some cheaper stuff that's not quite working out, or, you know, possibly an Annoy-o bot that's lost its Divine Shield, you can convert that into something possibly more useful. So, you know, maybe we're going to see this guy fall into a similar, sort of a similar groove that Tinkmaster Overspark used to fill when he was targetable. You know, back in the day, Tinkmaster Overspark was targetable. You could pick which minion became either a 5/5 dinosaur or 1/1 squirrel. And so this guy, you know, you can pick a friendly minion to adjust. So there is enough control out of this card in terms of controlling the Battle Cry that he could be useful on a competitive level, depending on what the other cards in your deck are. But you know, it all depends on what the random minion is, right? So yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Again, that's another card I'm going to kind of be keeping my eye on, but I'm not expecting a whole lot of competitive play out of. But you know, I would say as far as like 1 to 10 interesting level in terms of, I'm going to watch this one and think about it for competitive play depending on how the actual rules shake out. I'd give it about a 6 or so, 6 or 7, so a little bit more interesting than the average card. Let's move on. Looks like we've got a couple more spare parts. Reversing Switch, swap a minion's attack and health, and Rusty Horn, give a minion taunt. So 1 mana to give a minion taunt, that's certainly good. Swap a minion's attack and health, that's certainly good. So those can be 2 very strong spare parts, and we've seen the other ones that give stealth, that freeze, and stuff like that. So these are all potentially strong. The question is are the cards that produce them and are the cards that you get out of this going to be consistent enough to warrant competitive play? I would guess probably not, but I'm saying interesting a lot. It's all interesting to me. I'm sorry. It's just interesting. It's intriguing. There, we'll use the word intriguing instead this time. It's intriguing to me to see where this could end up. So let's move on before I repeat the word interesting any more times. Someone should have like an interesting counter down at the bottom of the screen or something for this video. 2 mana for the Shrinkmeister. 2/3. Alright, for 3/2 rather, for 2 mana. Give a minion -2 attack this turn. This card is just bonkers good. It's so insane. Think about this guy in your average Death Rattle Priest these days. You know, think about that with a good start with a Death Rattle minion, right? I mean, giving another minion -2 attack for a turn can really help you trade efficiently in the very early parts of the game, can help you go ahead and grab that tempo in the early game. So I think this guy has a lot of potential. This is definitely one of the strongest, I think, looking cards out of the stuff we've seen so far today. So I'm going to use him. He's going to be good. 8 mana for a 5/7 Sneed's Old Shredder. Death Rattle, summon a random legendary minion. So again, you know, what is the pool that these minions are being taken from? That's the question. So if it is your deck, I don't know. If it is something else, who knows? I mean, 8 mana for a 5/7, personally, probably not going to really see any play. Probably not going to be, you know, worth it. Because the thing is a lot of the legendary minions that are used right now have battle cries, right? Think about it. Alexstrasza, Garrosh, something like that. So I wouldn't want to put this guy in Control Warrior because I wouldn't want to accidentally summon one of those and not get the battle cry. I wouldn't really, you know, I mean, you could look at him in like Paladin possibly. He could summon a Kel'Thuzad. He could summon a Tyrion Forward Ring, Ysera, I suppose. So you can think of some good legendary minions that he may be able to summon, but I don't know, the fact that you really want to be in control of when your legendaries are played kind of makes him a little bit iffy for me. So I'm guessing we're probably not going to see a whole lot of use out of him, but we'll keep an eye on it anyway. Spider Tank, 3 for a 3/4. All right, straight up 3 for a 3/4. Just a good, solid, efficient minion, kind of a mini Yeti. We'll put him. We'll call him that Mini Yeti. 3 for 3/4 instead of 4 for a 4/5. Moving on, Time Rewinder. Return a friendly minion to your hand. Again, a potentially very, very strong spare part, but will you get the spare part you need when you need it? That's the question. Speaking of spare parts, 3 mana for 3/3. Tinkertown Technician, Battle Cry. If you have a mech, gain +1/+1 and add a spare part to your hand. So this guy, you know, as far as the spare part cards go, I like this guy because if you have a mech already out, he's 3 for 4/4. Great, that's very cost efficient. Awesome card. And and then possibly you get a really good spare part out of it too. So again, I think out of spare part cards, he could be really useful. I'm really curious to see what more is going to come out in this expansion that builds on the no pun intended, builds on the spare parts that are given to you by some of these cards. See how it all pans out. Unstable Portal, one of the Mage class cards that we were shown today. 2 mana to add a random minion to your hand. It costs 3 less. Now, take note, this is not 3 less for only this turn. This is just 3 less till the end of time, right? So it's possibly something that you could use to get something out fairly early. I mean, essentially it's 3 mana for 2 mana. And it is add a random minion, so you do draw a card as well. So I think this one could be really good. Again, there's that RNG factor as well, but the RNG I think is very well mitigated by the fact that you draw a card and it is a cheaper version of the card that you would have drawn otherwise. So I think depending on the deck, this card could end up being very useful. I'm almost certain we're going to see people try this one out in possibly control, possibly, you know, more mid-rangey kind of mage decks. Again, we were looking at things a little bit earlier that help you control the board as mage in Goblins versus Gnomes, and I think this is one of the ones that helps you build on that control that you've gained earlier, that you can kind of use this to play some cheaper, bigger creatures. Ideally, you know, if you get obviously a minion that costed 1 or 2 and it costs 3 less suddenly, well, hooray, it's free, but it's you know, I suppose you can still play it that turn then, so that's actually not that bad even. So yeah, I think this is just going to be a good card. I think it's just going to be a solid card. Moving on, 5 mana for a 5/5. Upgraded Repair Bot, give a friendly mech +4 health. So again, more mech synergy. And will there be enough synergy for this deck to make it, or for this this card rather, to make it into competitive play? Yeah, possibly. I mean, we've seen a lot of mechs that you know, look pretty useful. Say it's late game suddenly, and you have a Annoy-o-bot or Annoy-o-tron in your hand just kind of sitting around, and you've got this guy and it's turn 7. Well, suddenly you can get a 1/6 for 2, right? A 1/6 taunt with Divine Shield for 2. So, you know, you can set up some interesting stuff with this guy, because it's give a friendly minion +4 health. It's not heal. So I would assume that's going to mean it can be above and beyond their normal health. So I could see some use out of this guy, and if you just look at the pure mana efficiency, it's 5 for a 5/5, so a solid card. It's situational enough, though, that I will say, the question again comes to mind, what are we going to take out of our deck to put this guy in? So that's always a question you have to ask yourself, is that, yeah, it's cool, it looks good, but is it good enough to bump one of the existing cards in your deck out? And maybe he won't be able to quite do that, but I could see him getting some use. Moving on, there's the Voltron, or Voltron, if we use the 7 as a T, I guess. I don't know, 8 for a 4/8. He's got Charge and Mega Wind Fury, so that means he can hit potentially for 16 damage to the face, or, you know, 4 damage 4 times anything else on the board. So, pretty cool. Pretty neat. Again, he comes from Mimiron's head, so if you have that thing where 3 mechs, including Mimiron's head, survive until the beginning of your turn, you get this guy, right? So he can definitely be a game ender, I would say. And that's really about it. It all depends on if you can get the consistency with Mimiron's head, because again, you know, Thaddeus is really good. He's an 11/11. That's awesome. But can you get him out consistently enough? On the competitive level, people say no. So you don't see a Fugan and Stalag really in competitive decks. I think we saw it like once in OGN, and every once in a while you see it in a control deck, usually Paladin, but I don't think it's terribly good. So will this guy, will poor Voltron and Mimiron's head fall into the same category? I think it's less likely, but I think it's you know, I think it's still quite possible that they'll get kind of passed over. But again, a cool card, certainly terrifying. 16 damage just coming at you. That's pretty scary. 3 mana for Velen's Chosen. Give a minion +2/+4 and spell damage +1 for 3 mana, guys. For 3 mana, you give your minion a huge buff and spell damage +1. This could potentially be an extremely good card. Again, you know, I mean, you have to kind of think of it in the same terms that you think of the buff cards for Druid, and you don't necessarily see a ton of those be played. You know, Mark of the Wild gives +2/+2 and taunt, which is nice. This is +2/+4 and +1 spell damage. So, you know, again, I kind of like it. I've always been a fan of, even back to Magic the Gathering, I've always been a fan of buffing cards, you know, Giant Growth, things like that, Unholy Might, you know, I mean, stuff to make the creatures on your board stronger than they were before in a surprising way. You know, your opponent won't expect that 1/1 to suddenly become a 3/5, right, with +1 spell damage. So, you know, I think it's cool, and I think if used appropriately, it could be pretty good. Let's move on, and it looks like that's it. Whirling Blades at the end, give a minion +1 attack. Another spare part, and again, same thing as always. Will you get the right spare part at the right time from the right guy? Who knows? It's cool either way, though. My dog's running around like a maniac, and we've reached the end of the cards anyway, so I suppose that means it's time to end the video. And again, I mean, these were just my initial thoughts. Obviously, this isn't like the be-all, end-all, because I just saw these cards for the first time today. These are just my initial gut reactions. And again, this is only a fairly small part of the expansion at large that we'll get to see in December. So I'm really excited for this. The more cards the merrier. That's how it always is in CCGs. And I think so far Goblins versus Gnomes is certainly going to be exciting. So if you like the video, subscribe, follow me on Twitter at ggDoA. ggDoA, that is, and watch all my stuff on OGN as well. We've got a little bit of a hiatus right now as we kind of gear up for 2015, but that gives me time to make videos like this, so hopefully you enjoy it. Let me know on Twitter, whatever, and I guess I will see you on whatever the next video is. Thanks for watching, guys.